Previously on Transformers University, we talked about how Transformers the movie changed the face of the franchise. And now we begin to look at how that was felt around the world. And we'll start in Europe, looking at the 1986 toy line, right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode 68 of Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Bricali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the Toy Archive, the YouTube channel, the social media, and of course this podcast. And today we are taking a look at the 1986 toy line as it appeared on the continent of Europe. Now, before I get into the toy line in Europe, I just want to first off thank everyone who has helped out the site, either using the Amazon links at tfu.info/Amazon or joined us on the Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. We are so close to hitting our first goal on the Patreon. So for as little as $1 a month, you can sign up and be part of it. For $3 a month, you get some of our exclusive podcasts, including the Battle Drive episode I did last month, which was the final piece of the Find Your Fate Junior series to make it onto the show. So you can do that over at Patreon, patreon.com/TFUInfo. And once again, thank you everyone who's signed up. I really do appreciate it. Now, going to Europe, a few things we should talk about before we get into the toy line proper. First off, I just want to kind of give you an idea where my research for this came from. So the bulk of the research for this is off of tfwiki.net. Underneath the header, the Transformers, which is what they refer to for G1, they kind of break down the European toy line on a page there. Additionally, I supplemented some of this with some of the great reporting and photographs by our good friend Maz from TF Square One. So there's a few things he has mentioned in his blog that don't necessarily appear on the wiki, so it's worth talking about there. And lastly, there's a great catalog scan website, Botch the Crab. You can just Google that up. He's got all of the insert catalogs from the toys from the U.S. and from Europe, and I think even from Japan. He's been doing it for almost probably longer than I've been doing TFU.info, actually. So check that out as well. So combining those three things, I've been able to deduce a few things on my own. And let's start with the packaging. So the packaging in Europe in 1986 dropped the Milton Bradley logo from them. These were now being put out by Hasbro in just about every nation in Europe, with the exception of Italy and Greece, and we'll get into those in a little bit. Additionally, the language on the packaging, since it's Europe and the packaging is usually multilingual, the German language was dropped from the packaging in 1986. Now, for most of Europe, the toy line broke down as such. First off, in 86, Europe got just about all the same mini-bots as the U.S. as far as we know. They got Bumblebee and Hubcap, Outback and Swerve, Wheelie and Pipes, including the Pipes variant that is known as Puffer, which is Huffer in blue with a white body, like chest area, and blue parts. And this is different than the IGA Mexican Puffer that also exists. Another thing I've noticed in the listing from TF Wiki, Tailgate is not among the Autobots available in 1986, so I'm going to assume that Tailgate was not available in Europe. That is strange, really. But until I can find a confirmation otherwise, we'll just say he wasn't. Additionally, from the Autobots side, the Aerobots, Protectobots, Metroplex, and the Autobot Triple Changers were all available in 1986. Of the Autobot cars, Optimus Prime was available, as was Grapple, Hoist, and Trax, available in blue. Hound, Inferno, Red Alert, Sideswipe, Smokescreen, and Trailbreaker were all available, as were the three cars from the movie line, the Blur, Cup, and Hot Rod. Now, according to TF Wiki, Ultra Magnus was not available until 1987. However, on Botch the Crab's website, the 1986 catalog does show Ultra Magnus offered, and he's listed as Autobot leader. Again, I find this very interesting, and if you heard in our last episode, I feel like some of the pre-movie materials that might have been out there may have had Ultra Magnus as an upgraded form of Optimus Prime. Now, I don't have any confirmation for this. This is purely speculation on my part. But seeing him listed as Autobot leader, and in the Find Your Fate Junior books we talked about last episode, he's often referred to as the greatest Autobot of them all, or the Autobot leader. It just seems like it's a hard way to just drop Optimus Prime and then pile that on Magnus. Which really makes me think that Ultra Magnus, at some point in that initial run or initial version of a script somewhere, was meant to be Optimus Prime. Also of note, no Rodimus Prime available in 1986 in Europe. Now, for the Decepticon side of things, they had the Combaticons, the Stunticons, the Battle Chargers, and Octane all available in 1986. They also had the Constructicons available, and these were manufactured by CG, the company that manufactured Transformers for France in previous years. And these are the yellow Constructicons that many of you might have seen. And these are slightly different from the G2 yellow Constructicons and the late G1 European non-combining yellow Constructicons. These are combining. And the easiest way to tell them apart from all the other versions, the early 90s G1 European versions don't combine. And the G2 versions do combine, but they also have tampographed G2 symbols on them. Now, also available in Europe via CG were the Insecticons. And these were a little bit different in that they had an orange-ish, more orange-ish translucent chest and yellow trim that kind of went closer to orange. And according to Maz on TF Square 1, this is very similar to a lot of the reissue Insecticons we've gotten over the years, whereas the original ones have kind of a bright yellow on their trim. The reissue ones tend to hew towards orange. Also available that year were Cyclonus and Scourge. However, Galvatron was not available according to TF Wiki, but he was, just like Ultra Magnus, shown in the catalog. Trypticon was not available till 1987. And while TF Wiki doesn't mention Starscream being available, Maz mentions that there were a handful of jets available in 86. And those are the Coneheads, Dirge, Thrust, and Ramjet, and Starscream. And these are different than previous releases. These were all manufactured by CG. They feature black wheels and black landing gear and hard plastic nose cones, along with lighter opaque canopies. And it's interesting to note these here because those kind of designs are very similar to what IGA did in Mexico. And it does make me wonder that if the toolings or somehow the molds got passed back and forth between Mexico and CG in France, because that notion of constructing them with the hard plastic nose cone originates out of Mexico. And that's the entire line for mainland Europe. There's really not much different otherwise. Heading over to Italy, Gig would continue to produce Transformers for the Italian market. And a couple of interesting notes here. Italy would receive Ultra Magnus and Trypticon before the rest of Europe, at least according to TF Wiki. And we'll probably go over all the unique names for Italy because it's kind of cool, and some of these names do get used in the Transformers toy line years later. But for a personal story of mine, my grandmother used to go to Italy to visit family in Sicily every year, every other year, and she brought me back an Italian version of Slingshot, the aerial bot. And I always remember this because, one, the packaging was in Italian. I still have the tech specs somewhere. And two, it was just at the right time that she brought this one back for me because I had Slingshot already, and I had Metroplex. And the thing is, Metroplex has a feature on him where you can combine Scramble City style limbs onto his shoulders or his knees. The thing is, unlike the main body figures like Silverbolt, where the shoulder joints rotate, Metroplex's does not. So, being a kid, I shoved my slingshot into the shoulder of Metroplex and tried to turn him out to point Superion's gun off of his shoulder. It's very similar to what goes on with the War for Cybertron Siege line at the moment. And not knowing that shoulder insert didn't rotate, I ended up twisting off Slingshot's head. So at home, I do have somewhere a very headless Slingshot. And my grandmother came back with that one right around the same time. So it was perfect because then I had a new Slingshot to actually play with and put into my Superion. Now, the bulk of the 86 line in Italy were the combiners. And so that is the first four Scramble City combiners. And let's talk about the names because I think the names are interesting. Let's go through the aerial bots. Skydive was known as Log. Fireflight was known as Optor. Silverbolt was known as Radiant. Air Raid was known as Tornado. And Slingshot was known as Vertic because he is a VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing jet. And Superion was available as a gift set, was known as Pentajet, which means 5 jets. The Protectobots. Defensor was known as Defensor and was available in a gift set. Groove was known as Chips, like the TV show Chips about the cops on the motorcycles. Hotspot was known as Drago. This is post Rocky 4. Streetwise was known as Phantom. Blades was known as Racor. And First Aid was known as Serena. The Stunticons. Motormaster was known as Barracuda. Breakdown was known as Caimano. Dead End was known as Cobra. Dragstrip was known as Iguana. Wild Rider was known as Squallow. And Menasor, available as a gift set as well, was known as Pentacar, or 5 cars. The Combaticons. Brawl was known as Bomber. Swindle was called Crasher. Onslaught was called Destroyer. Those are 2 GoBot names back to back, right? Blastoff was known as Exploder. Vortex kept his name. And Bruticus, available as a gift set, was known as Multiforce, which is an interesting name because that will appear as a team name in Japan in a few years. Also of note here, the Predacons were available in 1986 in Italy, and I did not see them listed on TF Wiki as being available in the rest of Europe. Now, the Predacons were named, Dive Bomb was named Falcon, Rampage was named Felon, Felin, not Felon. Headstrong was known as Rhinox, another very important Transformers name down the line. Tantrum was known as Torox, which is another important name because Hasbro has used that name in place of Tantrum when they cannot get the proper copyright for it. And Razorclaw was known as Xannar, Zannar. Tripticon was available and known as Tripticon. Cyclonus and Scourge were available. Cyclonus named as Cyclone, and Scourge known as Sheriff. Ultra Magnus, as I mentioned earlier, was available, and he was known as Convoy, furthering my idea that he might have been an upgraded Optimus Prime. And Metroplex was also available in Italy, and he was known as Guardian. Another GoBot's name, go figure. Finally, the nation of Greece. A company called El Greco had a handful of Transformers releases that we can confirm in this day and age. There may have been more, but just going off of TF Wiki's notes, there were a handful of figures available via El Greco in the country of Greece. Most of them were mini cars, mini bots, I should say. Warpath, Beachcomber, Braun, Huffer, Powerglide, Cosmos, and Sea Spray. Additionally, Devastator and Defensor were both available as gift sets. And that's it. That's the bulk of the information I could find on the Transformers toy line in Europe in 1986. Some neat little differences there. The CG stuff is really interesting. I really do recommend going Google TF Square One. Look for Maz's posts. He posts such great stuff about European Transformers. I cannot recommend him enough, and he has been a big help since the early days of TFU.info. That'll wrap up this episode. And of course, if you want to help TFU.info, if you want to help the Toy Archive, yes, I'm still updating it. I mean, I'm like 3 years behind at the moment, but I'm catching up. We're putting it into the new design. We're getting there. But if you want to see what we're missing from the beginning of the line through 2016, swing on by to TFU.info, click on the help the page portion of navigation. I think if you just go to TFU.info/help, it should take you right there. There's always stuff we need photos of, and if you own it and you want to take some photos, always a great way to help the site. In fact, Maz was one of my first really big contributors early on, 17 years ago when TFU.info launched. That said, if you want to help the site in other ways, as I mentioned before, patreon.com/TFU.info. For as little as $1 a month, you can help out the site and help out this podcast. Of course, if you want to help out indirectly, TFU.info/Amazon. Use our Amazon links. Buy some stuff from Amazon. They'll kick back a small percentage my way. And all of that goes to helping the show and helping TFU.info. Finally, if you want to catch up with me, best way to do it's on Twitter, at TFU_info. But of course, you can catch me on Facebook, facebook.com/TFU.info, and Instagram.com/TFU.info. On all those places, I've been posting my daily desk bot. I've been trying to be a little better about it. I kind of slacked off for a little bit, but we're getting back into the swing of things as we get into the late portion of this summer. Finally, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.info. I post this podcast. I post our sister podcast, TFU News and Views. And I post a whole bunch of other stuff there as I see fit. And it's just a lot of good stuff on that channel. And I'm hoping to find some time to create a little bit more content for you there. But you want to be the first to know. Just click on that subscribe and click on the bell so you can get alerts when I do update the channel and the videos. Lastly, if you're listening to this podcast on your favorite podcatcher, iTunes, Google Play, or is it Google Music, Google Podcasts? They keep changing it. Whatever the Google platform is for podcasts at the moment, or Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, please subscribe and please leave us a review. The reviews do help tremendously. So if you're on iTunes, a 5-star review and a nice little comment always goes a long way and costs you nothing but a little bit of time. And of course, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this show and check out this podcast and all the other things that go along with being a part of the TFU.info family. Next time on the show, we are going once again by the numbers and breaking down the tech specs of the 1986 toy line. This should be a lot of fun. People really enjoy these episodes, and we'll do it one more time. So please join us for Transformers University. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.info. Until next time, see ya.